Ready?
Oh boy, you're squeezing today.
I know. Okay, hit record. How does my chair sound? Does it sound?
Yeah, it's got the proper squeak.
Okay, good. Here we go. Thousands of people gathered this morning to witness history. After 50 years, America is going back to the moon, just not today. Yeah, they had to scrub the Artemis launch today. Early in the morning, there's been bad weather in NASA, but we're going back to the moon after about 50 years. This was going to be a test flight. They were going to put it through the paces. It was unmanned. Nobody, just crash dummies. They were going to test the heat shield. And if it worked, and it didn't, they didn't launch today, but had it worked, the next blast off would have included 3 astronauts who would circle the moon. And they say we will have men and women on the moon again by 2024. That's good. That's exciting, isn't it? Something to be happy for. A lot of things to be happy about. Student loan debt has been forgiven. Well, some of it has. Republicans don't like that. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez over the weekend told Republicans, if you're so worried about what it would cost to forgive student loans, why don't you agree to reverse the 2017 tax cuts that gave nearly $1.5 trillion to the richest 1%? Congresswoman AOC said, quote, mind you, forgiving all student debt in America would cost about $1.7 trillion. So you could undo the 2017 tax cuts for the richest 1% and then forgive all student loans, plus have money left over to contribute to universal child care, tuition-free college, homelessness, etc. Somehow, a 1 point some odd, I don't know, what the tax cuts were like $1.5 trillion in 2017. Somehow that's not inflationary, but forgiving student loan debt, that's inflationary. The Biden White House went on the offensive on Friday and all weekend, attacking Republicans who accepted, and they named names, they attacked Republicans who accepted Paycheck Protection Program loans, had them forgiven, like Marjorie Taylor Greene. They had their Paycheck Protection Program loans forgiven, but this year they say forgiving student loans is inflationary. There's a moral hazard to forgiving student loans. Bharat Ramamurthy works inside the Biden White House. He's an economic advisor. Friday, he was asked, is it fair comparing student loans to small business loans?
We think it's a fair comparison, and here's why. So, since last July, we have forgiven, under the statutory terms of the PPP program, more than $350 billion worth of loans. And those are loans that the government has forgiven, turned into grants. And those are loans, by the way, of up to $10 million per business owner. Now, look, we believe that providing support to small businesses is the right thing to do. We didn't design PPP. Maybe we would have designed it a little bit differently if we were in charge. But broadly speaking, providing support to small business is a priority of the president. But look, has any Republican in the last year stood up and said, inflation is really high, you guys should stop providing this loan forgiveness to PPP recipients. You should slow it down. Or you should change the rules because it's unfair that these people should get up to $10 million in grants. No, in fact, it's the opposite. The pressure that we've gotten from Republicans on the Hill has consistently been do this faster, make it easier for people to get forgiveness. So our view is, why is there a double standard here? Why is it, from the perspective of Republicans, great to forgive a loan of up to $10 million to a business owner, but if we want to provide $10,000 or $20,000 in loan relief to a teacher or a bus driver or a nurse, all of a sudden it's socialism? That's what doesn't compute from our view. We don't think that that's consistent.
Yeah, this is from Congressman Jim Banks, and you're not supposed to say this. This is Republican Jim Banks, who tweeted on the 25th of August, and we talked about it on Friday's show, but I just keep looking at it and I'm thinking, I've never seen a more honest Republican Party. He writes, student loan forgiveness undermines one of our, student loan forgiveness undermines one of our military's greatest recruitment tools at a time of dangerously low enlistments. It undermines our military's greatest recruitment tools. You're broke. You have no choice. Join the military. My God, at least they're out in the open. There's a great article in The Guardian over the weekend written by an African-American. She's 65 years old. Her name is Lystra Small-Cluden. She's an American. She's 65. She says, I have $300,000 in student debt. I and older debtors are going on strike. Well, I've been talking about this for years, for people just to stop paying their student loans. See what happens. Easier said than done, but she's 65. She's organizing a debt strike. She writes, and this is terrifying. 10 years ago, so she was like 53, I began a doctoral degree program in human resources management. My biggest mistake was enrolling in a for-profit school. I did achieve my academic goals in August of 2016. That feeling of success was short-lived, however. After graduation, I had to begin repaying student loans. Again, this is a for-profit PhD program. They should be outlawed. She goes on to write in The Guardian, my school didn't play fairly with me while I pursued my doctoral degree. Of course not. It's a for-profit college. The administrators changed the length of my program from 3 to 6 years. They actively steered me away from my research interest in the effects of slavery and globalization, adding more time to my program of study. Meanwhile, I continued to pay. From an initial loan payoff of $75,000 per year, my debt rose to $300,000. Incredible. Who is going to protect the American people, if not the federal government, from unscrupulous lenders and unscrupulous for-profit universities and colleges that should be against the law, should be shut down? All right. Well, after Donald Trump incited a riot on January 6, Twitter finally decided, hey, maybe it's time to deplatform this unhinged lunatic. Sure, free speech is great, but, our company shouldn't be making money off someone who wants to destroy our democracy. Maybe it's not a good look for us to give voice to this type of speech. So they kicked him off Twitter, and Trump created his own social media platform. It's called Truth Social. Launched in February to countless glitches. First couple of weeks, you couldn't even get on. There was a waiting list. One of the biggest glitches over Truth Social is it is run by former congressman and former Republican chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, who was being paid $750,000 a year to run it and, of course, keep his mouth shut about other things. Well, not so surprisingly, Truth Social is not doing well. It's down to only 300,000 visitors a day. Turns out there isn't that big an audience. Not that many people want to read death threats to FBI agents. Who would have guessed? And because it's owned by Donald Trump, Truth Social is stiffing its vendors and probably its investors. I think the SEC is looking into it. Well, like I said, because it's owned by Trump, Truth Social is stiffing its vendors like their web host. Donald Trump owes so far $1 million to RightForge, a conservative web hosting service. I don't know much about the internet, but I'm pretty sure you need to pay the host of your website first. That's non-negotiable, and not a smart move to stiff your host. Truth Social, days are numbered. And some say the days are numbered for Donald Trump, although this has always been a Tom and Jerry cat and mouse game where we think, now I finally caught the Roadrunner. But a lot of people think it's only a matter of days before Attorney General Merrick Garland indicts Donald Trump for keeping classified material inside his Mar-a-Lago safe. In June of 2022, two lawyers working for Donald Trump signed an affidavit promising the government that all classified documents had been returned. This after a previous visit by the Justice Department. The Justice Department went to Mar-a-Lago. They said, you can't have this. And they promised to send it back. And then two lawyers signed an affidavit saying, we sent it back. Well, according to the FBI, their most recent search of the former president's estate revealed there were still boxes of classified material he had not turned over. The Justice Department had been negotiating with Trump for more than a year to turn over these documents, but for some reason he refused. The FBI is now saying some of those documents retrieved could compromise foreign nationals who are secretly cooperating with our intelligence agencies. Now, refusing to turn over sensitive documents could result in Donald Trump being charged with obstruction. According to a law passed in 2002, obstruction is a serious offense. It is a crime to withhold and or tamper with and or destroy government documents, especially when the government is trying to get its hands on those documents. Why would Trump do this? A Trump-appointed U.S. district judge over the weekend said she might appoint what is called a special master to look over the materials that have now been obtained by the FBI, taken from Mar-a-Lago. She will appoint a special master to see if these documents truly rise to the level of highly classified material as suggested in the warrant. This could delay an indictment, but there are reports that among Trump's closest advisors, these possible charges are the most worrisome, that Donald Trump is getting pretty scared over this specifically. Who knows, right? But they say Garland might indict him. Over the weekend, Senator Lindsey Graham echoed the talking points we've been hearing from Trump's lawyers. The lawyers have been saying that if you indict Donald Trump, that would result in mass protests. Mass protests, they imply, that would make January 6 appear timid by comparison. Here's Lindsey Graham over the weekend.
And I'll say this. If there's a prosecution of Donald Trump for mishandling classified information after the Clinton debacle, which you presided over and did a hell of a good job, there'll be riots in the streets.
If there's going to be rioting in the streets, you better bring your scuba equipment. The Washington Post reported this weekend that the global sea level is poised to rise by more than a foot in the next 80 years, whether or not we hit the benchmarks agreed to in the Paris Climate Agreement. That's because Greenland's ice sheets are melting at a much quicker pace than previously imagined. 110 tons of ice, which comprises about 3% of Greenland's ice sheet, is expected to melt over the next couple of decades, whether we do anything about climate catastrophe or not. The 110 tons of melting ice are expected to destroy low-lying island nations and third world coastal communities lacking the resources to adapt to climate catastrophe. You know, places like Pakistan, where melting glaciers combined with monsoon season are making for the deadliest floods since 2010. Back in 2010, 2,000 people died. So far this year, heavy floods in Pakistan have killed more than 1,000, 348 of them children. It's injured 1,527. Since last night, 125 were killed, nearly 100 were injured by more flooding. 300,000 people have lost their homes in Pakistan so far this year from flooding. Damages are expected to exceed $10 billion. Republicans, including Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, we might as well call them Republicans, should read Fortune magazine, which chronicles and celebrates capitalism. Turns out forgiving student loans doesn't cause inflation. Climate change does. Climate catastrophe is more inflationary than forgiving student loans. Fortune reports this week that 3/4 of American farmers blame a bad harvest season this year on extreme heat. And a bad harvest season means it will be more expensive to feed cattle, which are also dying from extreme heat and or lack of water. In Europe, the cost of meat so far is up 12% this year. Water shortages in California have pushed the cost of tomato paste up nationwide by nearly 80%. Fortune says high prices for wheat and cattle hurt the poor especially hard, since a much larger share of their income goes towards food. Fortune also says record heat in Europe, America, and China is posing serious problems for hundreds of millions of people employed by the agricultural industry around the world, because rising temperatures make it impossible for them to work outdoors. This is not Jacobin reporting this. This is Fortune magazine. One of the criticisms of that big climate bill, known as the Inflation Reduction Act, was signed about 2 weeks ago. One of the criticisms is it gives tax breaks to people who can afford to buy an electric vehicle, but it provides no incentives for low-income households to go green. In France, this year, 12% of all new cars purchased are electric, and the government provides 6,000 euros in subsidies that would go towards the purchase of an electric vehicle, along with some other cash incentives. But like here in America, that still keeps a lot of people out of the electric vehicle market. It is still something purchased by people who have money. Well, last week, French President Emmanuel Macron unveiled a state-sponsored program where low-income residents would be able to lease an electric vehicle for as little as $100 a month. Now, it's not free, but $100 a month is still cheaper than filling up your car if it runs on gasoline. Gasoline now costs $5.54 a gallon in France. Here in America, the average gallon of gas is now costing $3.99. It's down, but a year ago it cost $3.20. That's about a 22% jump in 1 year, but it is coming down. On Friday's show, I talked about California banning the sale of all gasoline-powered vehicles by 2035. One of the things I mentioned is because California is such a huge market, it's like the 7th largest economy in the world, their decisions when it comes to what they allow on the roads affects automakers. They build their cars to please the California market. And because of that, roughly 14 other states, 17 other states and the District of Columbia follow California's lead when it comes to fuel standards and other laws regarding what kind of cars are allowed on the road. Section 177 of the Clean Air Act permits 17 states and the District of Columbia to adopt California's motor vehicle emission standards in lieu of the federal government. It's pretty interesting. That's part of the Clean Air Act, Section 177. As California goes, so goes the civilized part of the United States. And as expected, Washington State announced today that it too would ban the sale of gasoline-powered automobiles by 2035. Massachusetts is expected next. Solutions continue to come from the state of California. 63 billion gallons of water running through California's aqueducts evaporate into thin air each year. And California is hoping to stop that by installing a canopy over 4,000 miles of open air aqueducts to prevent that water from evaporating. And not just any canopy. This is really interesting. It's a canopy of solar panels, a pilot program costing $20 million, covering only 8,500 feet of aqueduct around Turlock. That will be finished next year. They're going to do a pilot program to not only prevent water from evaporating, but using solar panels on top of the aqueducts to generate electricity, begging the question, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we all in on this idea? Modesto, California is a farm community, and the most important thing farm country needs before farmers is water. That's why Modesto, California's town slogan is this. They built the Modesto Arch. I remember driving through it and not really quite understanding why their town motto reads water, wealth, contentment, and health. Water, wealth, contentment, and health. That's the Modesto Arch. It's the first thing you see when you drive into Modesto. Water, wealth, contentment, and health. The very first word is water, because without it, there is no wealth, contentment, or health. And Modesto right now has no water. You know, there's an old expression, the shallower the pond, the meaner the fish. The people of Modesto can't make it rain. They can't get the Republicans to stop drilling for oil, which means the droughts are only going to get worse. The shallower the pond, the meaner the fish. So what power, what control do the people of Modesto have? What can they do? When the pond gets shallow, they can just get meaner. As if nobody has anything better to do, on Saturday in Modesto, California, the National Straight Pride Coalition held a march outside a local abortion clinic to express support for heterosexuality, the nuclear family, Western civilization, Caucasians, Christianity, and nationalism. Everything I hate. Boy, they just checked every box of everyone and everything I hate. I don't hate Christians, but I hate Christian nationalists. The Modesto Bee reports that the National Straight Pride Coalition was joined in the march by members of the Proud Boys. 200 counter-protesters representing the LGBTQ community in Modesto arrived with signs saying fascists not welcome here. Police officers fired beanbags and pepper spray at the LGBTQ counter protesters who allegedly assaulted members of the Proud Boys with bottles of water. You had to throw a bottle of water at the Proud Boys in Modesto. So you not only wasted time, you wasted water in Modesto. This is Modesto's third straight Pride Parade. Third straight Pride Parade. Last year's also ended in violence. As the show continues today, I have a question I'd like to ask my guests and my audience. Do you allow them to march and ignore them? Do you ignore the Proud Boys, or do you take to the streets? I don't know what the answer is. Not quite sure. But as evidenced in Modesto on Saturday, the police are going to side with the Proud Boys. More members of the LGBTQ community got arrested than Proud Boys. By the way, as of September 2nd, the government will no longer be sending us free at-home COVID tests. The money just isn't there. So money for Ukraine, right? We still can't get the Republicans to pass I think it's a $15 billion COVID relief package. And so the single best way to prevent the spread of COVID is testing. Test. And I got some free tests from our government. I hope all of you are taking advantage of it. Do it now, because September 2nd, they won't be free anymore. And according to the Census Bureau, 3.8 million renters will be evicted in the next 2 months. 3.8 million renters will be evicted in the next 2 months. That's good news for the Republican Party, because as I've pointed out on this show, half of all renters in America live at or below the poverty line. And if you're getting evicted, you are below the poverty line, you don't have a place to live, I doubt you're going to make it to the polls. I doubt you're going to be voting. So what was looking like a big red wave is now looking to be more of a little red trickle. Joe Biden's approval ratings have risen 6%. It's the highest for him all year. He's still underwater, with 56% of Americans disapproving of the way he's handling the job. However, the Supreme Court's decision to reverse Roe is turning out to be a gift for the Democratic Party. The House of Representatives is expected to turn Republican. However, the latest polling from CBS says, as of now, the GOP is expected to pick up only 12 seats, giving them a slim majority of 226 seats. That would be versus the Democrats, who are expected to end up with 209 seats. That's far fewer from the 240 seats Republicans were expecting at the beginning of the year. And like I said, the midterms are only 2 months and 10 days away. Who knows what the future holds? The Washington Post reports this morning that Democrats are even considering the unimaginable, and that would be keeping the House. It's almost settled that the Democrats are going to pick up some seats in the Senate, unless something strange happens. But as I said, they're expected to lose the House. The Dems need right now to protect a 5-seat majority in the House. And up until Joe Biden's recent rash of legislative wins, it was received wisdom that Biden would be dragging his party down. But Joe's approval rating is up. And the Washington Post reports that since the reversal of Roe, there have been 4 special elections for House seats. And in each one, the Democrat performed better than Joe Biden did in 2020. And that sometimes serves, something like that, serves as a predictor of a possible shift, a blue shift heading into November. However, historically, as we all know, the party out of power tends to win the midterms. Like I said, Democrats are expected to keep the Senate. November would herald the end. November would herald the end of our democracy. That's what Colorado's Secretary of State, Democrat Jena Griswold, told The Guardian over this weekend. Jena Griswold, like I said, Democrat, is running for re-election as Secretary of State in Colorado, and she warned that it is the job of a Secretary of State to protect the sanctity of elections. But too many Republican candidates for Secretary of State have pledged allegiance to Donald Trump, no matter who wins. There are now 27 Secretary of State contests in November, 13 held by Democrats, 13 held by Republicans, one held by an independent. One would like to think they would all be independent, but this is America. Jena Griswold chairs the Democratic Association of Secretaries of State. And in the interview with The Guardian, she said, quote, "What we can expect from the extreme Republicans running across this country is to undermine free and fair elections for the American people, strip Americans of the right to vote, refuse to address security breaches, and unfortunately, be more beholden to Mar-a-Lago than the American people." Going into the midterms, keep in mind there are 27 elections for secretaries of states, and pay attention to that because those secretaries of states will be counting the votes in 2024 when we pick our president. The Republican Party announced this morning that Paris Dennard no longer serves as its national spokesman, as well as its director of Black Media Affairs. Paris Dennard held both positions. For 2 years, he previously worked in both the George W. Bush and Donald Trump White Houses. A spokesman for the RNC refused to say why Paris Dennard has been let go. However, the Washington Post reported back in 2018 that Paris Dennard was fired from Arizona State University after being charged with sexual misconduct. The Buffalo Bills punter Matt Araiza was cut from the roster after a woman came forward accusing him of participating in a gang rape at a party last year while she was still in high school. Ozzy Osbourne is selling his California mansion and moving back to Great Britain, saying he's afraid of getting shot to death here in America. Ozzy said, quote, "I'm fed up with people getting killed every day from these mass shootings." Ozzy is selling his $18 million mansion in Los Angeles. I think it's in Hancock Park. And he plans to relocate permanently to his 350-acre estate in Buckinghamshire. Buckinghamshire. I would assume that would be in England. A 26-year-old Dutch soldier died from gunshot wounds he suffered while visiting downtown Indianapolis. 2 other Dutch soldiers were wounded. Police at this time are offering no information as to what prompted the killing. And I think that covers everything. Missouri is bringing back corporal punishment. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that a Missouri school district is going to start paddling students when they need to be punished. Of course, parents need to sign a note, telling the teacher it's okay to beat the shit out of my child. As the Wall Street Journal says, corporal punishment has been condemned by medical professionals. It's not right to hit your kids.